You won't believe how fast a man can go from invisible to dangerous. 1 second, I was standing outside my son's backyard with a warm cobbler in my hands, and the next, I was hearing my daughter-in-law's voice cut to the fence like a knife. "Why is he even still alive?" She laughed after saying it. Not loud, not bold, just sharp enough to slice something deep inside me. My palms didn't shake. Not yet. Instead, I pushed the gate open and walked in as if nothing had reached me. The music thumped too fast at my age. The string lights buzzed overhead, and no one turned to greet me. Some faces were family, some were strangers, but none carried even a flicker of welcome. "Leo, we didn't know you'd be here," said Mara, my son's wife, the same voice from behind the fence. I held up the cobbler and muttered, "Brought dessert." No one offered to take it from me. I walked to the far end of the table and sat down. The chair groaned, my back ached, but I forced myself upright. Around me, everyone laughed, plates clattered, glasses raised. My son Mateo lifted a beer and toasted to family. Not a single glass moved in my direction. The cobbler sat there in its foil, like a guest that didn't belong. Sugar crust dulled, untouched. A boy nearly tripped over me, murmuring the automatic, "Sorry, kids say to furniture." At the near end, Mara's mother spoke with rehearsed cheer. "What a lovely evening. So many memories here." I whispered back, "Yes, so many," though no one was listening. Mateo walked around with the ease of a man who had practiced warmth like an actor repeating lines. His smile stopped just short of sincerity, his hands resting on shoulders before moving on quickly, never letting anything get too real. In the corner stood the maple tree, my maple. When Mateo was a boy, he named the branches like teammates. I remembered Helen's laugh, my late wife, when she told him to keep at least 1 foot on the ground as he dangled half off, reaching for the sky. That tree had been our witness, and now it stood silent while my son made his announcement. Mara clapped her hands, her bracelet chiming like little bells. "Quick before dessert," she beamed, turning toward Mateo. He stepped forward, smiled like a salesman, and said, "We've loved this house, but it's time for the next step. The market is good, we're selling." Applause exploded, sharp and bright. Men slapped him on the back. Someone shouted, "Upgrade!" Mara's mother sighed in triumph. I sat still, my ribs tightening as though they were counting themselves. I asked quietly, "When were you going to tell me?" Mateo's eyes darted from mine. "It's too much upkeep," he muttered. The word burned on my tongue. Upkeep? Was that what he called the pipes I fixed in the dead of winter, the gutters I cleared after Helen's funeral, the tree I trimmed so it wouldn't fall on his room? To him, those years were just upkeep. To me, they were life. Mara gave me her smallest smile, the one she uses on strays. "It's not about the past, Leo. We just want something modern." But the past wasn't something I could shrug off. The past smelled like fresh paint, Murphy's oil soap, and chlorine from summers when laughter still filled these walls. The future, as they described it, smelled only like paper. Contracts, signatures, pens pressed hard to prove intent. Dessert time came, and Mara paraded cupcakes with blue frosting, bright and decorative. No one reached for my cobbler. I offered a pie server from the kitchen drawer. She waved me off. Cupcakes are easier, less mess, less memory. Mateo drifted near, whispered, "Dad, I didn't mean for you to hear it like that. We were going to talk this week." I looked him dead in the eye. "When the sign is already planted on the lawn?" He exhaled, accusing me of being dramatic. I told him flat, "No, I'm just being accurate." A photo was called for, people clumped together near the fence. Mateo raised his hand halfway toward me, like a gesture more than an invitation. "I'll take it," I said, staying in my seat. As the group inhaled together, I wondered if any of them knew how much breath costs when you've been priced out your own history. Eventually I stood, picked up the cobbler. It had cooled into resignation. No one stopped me. At the gate, I felt the ridge in the wood I'd meant to sand years ago. Helen once kissed my temple there and told me no one would notice. She was wrong. Evidence always lingers. I closed the gate, stepped onto the sidewalk, and the air felt cleaner. Back in my small apartment, I set the cobbler on the counter and cut a square. It held its shape, a small victory. I didn't eat. Instead, I listened to the answer machine blink. Mateo's voice, careful, distant, said, "Hey, Dad, sorry about the timing. We'll talk. It's good for the kids. Love you." He never said my name, never Dad as a person, just a soft sidestep around anything sharp. I poured coffee into Helen's chipped mug, the one she once taped and insisted we keep. I thought back through the night, through the lap behind the fence, the toast of family, the casual sale of a lifetime boxed up like winter coats. I took out a pad of paper, wrote 4 words: keys, accounts, house, silence, drew a box around house, then another, a guardrail, a decision. I remembered how many times I had caught things falling, pipes, gutters, debts, lives. Always me, always silent. Now silence would serve a different purpose. I looked at Helen's copper kettle, dulled and waiting, and her voice echoed, "Things stay alive longer if you care for them." Alive. That word hit me harder than Mara's laugh. The next morning, I brewed 1 cup of coffee, toasted bread edge to edge because leaving corners dry was a sin in Helen's kitchen. I cut another square of cobbler, packed it for later, because later deserves kindness too. My phone buzzed with a vague text from Mateo. "Lunch this week?" I typed sure, deleted it, then deleted again. Accuracy mattered now. I buttoned a shirt, because decisions demand buttonholes. Walked outside, nodded to a neighbor with a bag of oranges, then sat in my car. I thought of Mara's voice, of Mateo's toast, of my name disappearing in their mouths. I didn't feel rage. Rage is loud and needs an audience. What I felt was steadiness, the kind that builds in your spine until your hands know exactly what to do. Keys, accounts, house, silence. The easiest to lose, the hardest to reclaim. I turned the ignition, the engine caught, and I drove forward without looking back. I hadn't gone to Evelyn's office expecting clarity, but clarity was what I carried out in the weight of a binder under my arm. Paper spoke louder than protest, and the stamped revocation, the new healthcare proxy, and the tidy notes on executor and beneficiaries were more than pages. They were a voice, my voice, written in a way no one could deny. The thump of the notary's seal was still in my ears as I walked the hot sidewalk. It felt less like a seal than a lock clicking shut on a door I didn't want to open again. At home, I cleared the kitchen table as if it were a desk waiting for its owner. For decades, my desk had been at the bank, a place where people came to me for order. Now the work was mine, and the stakes were no less serious. I wrote cover letters like prayers. Precise, unadorned, built to be answered. Enclosed, please find revocation of durable power of attorney. Please update your records immediately. Confirmation required. That rhythm, steady as a tick of a metronome, steadied me in return. The landline rang at 2, and I knew before I lifted the receiver that it would not be good news. Marcy's voice slid through the line with practiced brightness. They were having realtors take photographs tomorrow, she said. They would keep my history in mind, she said. Buyers ate up that kind of story. Her laugh was thin glass, and I let it fall. I'm not a party to the sale. I told her, say what you like to the buyers. I won't be there to hear it. The silence that followed told me Daniel was on the line too, breathing through her words. They wanted to check a box, tell me without including me. But boxes can't hold what isn't offered. When the call ended, I let the dial tone run long enough to wash the words off me like dust. The post office smelled of tape and tiredness. I stood in line with my envelopes and asked for certified mail with return receipt. You want proof they got it? The clerk asked. Yes, I said. I want paper that says a room heard me. Proof wasn't vanity. It was armor. Back home, I labeled the binder with a single word. Control. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. Control was not about holding anyone else down. It was about lifting myself back upright. I wrote notes on Post-its and stuck them inside the cover. Bank visit tomorrow. Brokerage after that. Insurance after that. A map in yellow squares, each one a foothold. At 4:30, the buzzer startled me. It was Lily, 16 and sharp, her backpack heavy, her eyes heavier. She carried a shoebox and a quiet urgency. When she hugged me, the apartment shifted its shoulders and stood taller. She set the shoebox on the table and opened it like an offering. Inside were drawings, charcoal watercolor, each one a thought turned into shape. A maple tree with branches labeled like train lines. A chessboard with only a king and rook left, still winning. My kitchen table, already drawn with a binder labeled control. She had drawn me before I knew myself. "Can I keep this one?" I asked, touching the chessboard. "I made for you," she said. The assignment was an endgame. She glanced at the kettle on the stove. "You polished it," she said. "I did." Her eyes moved to my list. Keys, accounts, house, silence. She read without asking. She didn't need to ask. "They're taking pictures tomorrow," she said. They took down my old painting and put up one of those bicycle quotes. "Life is a journey." She rolled her eyes. 16 perfectly. Journeys include what the driver allows. I told her, "Grandpa, are you mad at me? For not saying anything? For laughing? I'm disappointed you learned the wrong etiquette." I said, "But proud you came here to unlearn it." She exhaled like she had been holding her apology for days. "Can I come here sometimes? Not to hide, just to be." "You can," I said, "but I won't be here to hide either. I'm busy." She smiled. She believed me. Before leaving, she handed me a flyer for the Greenbridge shelter, a note at the bottom in her hand. "I'm thinking of helping here this summer." "That's a good thought." I told her. It was more than a thought. It was a bridge. After she left, I sat with the flyer beside the binder. Housing, dignity, endgame. Evelyn had asked what mattered beyond family. I had an answer now. It wasn't an alternative to family. It was simply a place they could not erase me from. The next morning, I shaved with care, put on a tie Helen disliked, and arrived at the bank before the doors opened. Trina, the manager, greeted me with competence. In her office, I slid the revocation across the desk. "Remove all access," I said. "Cancel the secondary card. Reissue mine. Flag any attempt with the old POA." She typed quickly, precisely. "Done," she said. "Confirmation will arrive by mail, not email." When she mentioned a plumbing emergency check signed last winter under Daniel's authority, I felt the tilt of recognition. I had been there, holding the flashlight, yet the bank had called him. Paper had given him permission. Now, paper had taken it back. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk with a temporary card in my wallet and a binder under my arm. The sun was no brighter, the city no quieter, but the ground itself felt different beneath my shoes. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had traction. You won't believe how quiet power feels until it's sitting in your hands. After I signed the papers with Evelyn, the trust was no longer a draft. It was law wearing my name like armor. The house wasn't theirs to parade me through anymore. My life wasn't their brochure, and the rules of inheritance had shifted away from bloodlines and toward merit. I didn't feel triumphant when the notary sealed it. I just felt steady. Evelyn said boring was how we win, and for once I believed her. That steadiness carried me into the week like a metronome. Lily came by with her sketchbook, graphite still under her fingernails, and sat up at my table without asking. She drew while I wrote letters, both of us respecting the silence that wasn't empty but shared. At one point she looked up, asked me if I was happy. "No," I told her, "but I'm correct." She nodded like correctness was a starting line, not a consolation prize, and bent back to her drawing. I watched her hands move. She drew my binder first, before she even drew me, as if she understood that everything I was now rested inside that stack of pages. Later, she slid her phone across to show me the listing. Brightened photos, captions that treated me like a spare part. Original owner charm. First floor perfect for aging parent. "Tell them I'm already living," I muttered, and she snorted hard enough to smudge her shading. 16-year-olds understand truth better than agents in heels. By Friday, I was standing in front of 10 strangers at the community center, whiteboard behind me, dry erase marker in my hand. I wasn't teaching math. Not really. I was teaching order. We budget time before we budget money. I said, because money obeys whatever schedule you've already promised other people. They looked at me like I was handing out confessions instead of calendars. When one man asked what to do if his daughter-in-law already controlled his schedule, I said, draft a new one. I know a lawyer who can help with the legal parts. I can help with the math. A woman dabbed her eyes when I showed them how to put their important papers in a 3-ring binder labeled control. If you leave your life in the cloud, I told them, your children will change the forecast. The laugh that followed was dry, but real, and I saw a spine straighten in their chairs. During the break, another woman whispered that her son said power of attorney was just easier. Easier for who? I asked. Revoke it if it makes you smaller. Keep your life. She studied my hands on the marker, saw that I'd signed enough documents to mean it. When the class ended, I caught sight of Marcy's mother slipping out the back, sunglasses perched like she'd forgotten whether she wanted to be seen. She hadn't said a word, but she'd listened. People always think confrontation happens in living rooms, but more often it happens in rooms like that, quiet, fluorescent, folding chairs, dignity penciled in where it had been erased. The next morning, I went to the tax auction. They gave me bidder number 48. When the parcel came up, Daniel's neglected duplex, I didn't raise my hand first. I let the others blink, let impatience spend their adrenaline, then moved. Years of the Postal Service had taught me patience is louder than money. The gavel fell, and the lien was mine. Not his house. Not yet, but a calendar had shifted in my favor. They could redeem it, pay what they owed plus penalty, or they could ignore it and watch the clock side with me. Either way, I wasn't invisible anymore. That night, I laid the lien certificate next to Evelyn's executed trust and Lily's latest drawing. 3 versions of the same thing. Proof. Proof I existed in ink, not in someone else's script. I added 3 new words to my old list. County Code Calendar, and tucked the page into the binder. The kettle hissed softly, like applause you don't need an audience for. Sunday, Lily came again, hair tangled, eyes alert. She asked if stubbornness was really what I was cultivating. No, I told her. I'm cultivating sovereignty. She grinned, said she learned that word in English class. For the first time in months, I believed she'd grow up with more than my silence to guide her. Monday, Evelyn's envelope arrived. Inside was a trust, stamped and recorded, plus an extra copy of the clause I'd underlined 3 times. No beneficiary shall be entitled to any distribution by relation alone. I set it on the table where sunlight touched it, then leaned back in my chair. For the first time in years, the room felt furnished, not by furniture, but by decisions that were mine and mine alone. He bought himself a reprieve, and I bought something that actually mattered. That was the exchange written in ink, not an argument. Rosa didn't ask what the money meant to me. Lily didn't ask what it meant to Daniel. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain. The transfer stood on its own legs. I'd told the truth on paper. Now I told it with a check. That night, I sat at the counter with toast and 2 strong tea. The envelope from Daniel, now opened, sat beside the empty plate. I had read every line of his scrawl. Pleas, bargains, a litany of you owe me dressed up as apology. And yet, tucked inside was a photograph. Lily at 6, cheeks full, holding a kite bigger than her torso. He had written on the back, "Remember when the wind did the work for us?" He thought that sentiment would keep me. But I am not the wind, I thought. I am the ground. The phone rang again at dawn, the kind of call meant to wake you up with someone else's emergency. This time, I let it go. If it was Rosa, she'd leave a message. If it was Daniel, he'd learned that urgency doesn't unlock doors anymore. Instead, I shaved, put on a press shirt, and walked to the community center. The second class had grown into a third. People brought their cousins, their neighbors, their quiet shame wrapped in folders. I didn't preach. I handed out binders. Truth, copies, calendar, the tabs read. The room filled with the sound of pages sliding into plastic sleeves. Paper against paper, louder than protest. After class, a man in a paint-splattered hoodie waited by the door. "You helped a woman in 2C, he said. "She told me you don't charge." "I don't," I answered. He nodded once and handed me a folded utility bill. Then show me how not to get buried. His hand shook when he said it, not from weakness, but from the weight of finally asking. I unfolded the bill and slid my pen across the columns. You start by putting your name on the line where it belongs, I said. His eyes flickered like a man who had just remembered his own reflection. That evening, Lily arrived with another sketch. This one was of me at the shelter, head bent over a notebook, while another man leaned in as if my words were light. She had written at the bottom, "Deliverable. You drew me kinder than I am," I said. "No," she replied. "I drew you exact." She left it on the table, propped against the kettle like a mirror I couldn't argue with. Daniel called again that night, this time his voice lower, slower. "You're dismantling me," he said. "No," I answered. "I'm dismantling the scaffolding that kept you from standing." He asked if Lily had been with me. I told him she had, and that she would keep coming until she chose otherwise. Silence stretched, then broke with a sigh. She's the only one who believes I can still fix it. Then prove her right, I said, and hung up before he could ask me to help him prove it. At the shelter the next day, Rosa pulled me aside. "One of the men you taught came back," she said. "He opened a savings account. He brought the slip like a diploma." She smiled with her whole face, not just the polite part. "He said to tell you thank you." I shook my head. "Don't tell me. Tell him to keep the receipt." Rosa laughed. "You don't know how to take credit, do you?" "I know how to give it," I said. Later, alone at home, I sat with the binder open, sliding the photograph of Lily with her kite into the tab marked "Not Yet." Beside it, I placed her sketch of me, the word "deliverable" shining under the lamp. For once, my hands didn't tremble. They rested steady, as if they knew the map had already been chosen. When I turned off the light, the kettle caught the moon in its curve and held it quiet as a promise. I realized then that the story wasn't about Daniel anymore. It wasn't about Marcy or the house, or even the debts. It was about the ledger I was writing for myself, one that balanced not in dollars, but in dignity. And for the first time, I closed the binder without fear it would be open against me. It was mine, and so was the silence that followed. I carried the mail slot to the door, held it against the wood, and traced where it would live. The brass caught the late light, like it had been waiting its whole life for this door. The drill hummed steady, and when the last screw tightened, the slot sat there quiet but certain. I wrote one sentence on a slip of paper. "Here is where things arrive and stay," and slid it through. It landed with a clank I trusted. Tuesday's class was larger than usual. Word spreads when you give people receipts for their dignity. Daniel came early, binder in hand, numbers circled with more care than he'd once given his own birthday. He sat up straight, asked about interest rates as if the question mattered to more than his wallet. I answered like it did. Beside him, Miguel nodded along. The cardigan woman smiled faintly. And for the first time, Daniel wasn't the loudest presence in the room. He was a student among students. Afterward, Rosa cornered me in the hall. "You're not just teaching budgets," she said. "You're teaching exits. People leave shame behind in your class." I didn't have an answer. Some truths don't want to bow on them. On my way home, the maple across the street dropped one orange leaf right at my feet, like punctuation at the end of a chapter. I carried it inside and pressed it between the pages of my binder, under the tab marked history. Paper keeps better when it has company. That evening, Lily stopped by with a thermos of hot chocolate. She sat at the table, hair tucked behind one ear, and looked at the newly mounted slot. "It suits you," she said. "Strong, quiet, stubborn." She poured 2 cups, added marshmallows like punctuation. "Dad told me he carried boxes again," she said. "He didn't complain once." Her eyes dared me to admit it mattered. "It does," I said. She smiled. "I knew you'd say that." Then she pulled a folded page from her backpack and slid it toward me. A sketch of the door, the brass slot gleaming, and a small slip of paper midfall, captured like flight. At the bottom, she'd written, "Delivery." I traced the drawing with one finger. "You keep catching me," I said. "No," she replied. "I keep catching what you built." The phone rang later. Evelyn again. "The sale is recorded." "It's done," she said. "The house is no longer yours, Walter." And that's the cleanest sentence I can offer. I know, I said. Any regrets? Only that I didn't learn sooner how boring justice looks. It's not a gavel. It's a stack of papers in a mailbox. She laughed softly. You'll bill me for metaphors one of these days. We hung up, and I sat in the stillness, binder on the table, kettle polished, mail slot shining like a new rule. The maple whispered to the window, steady, patient, stubborn as a man who has finally remembered his own weight. I didn't need to win. I didn't need to rehearse pain. I needed only the clank of a letter sliding home, the quiet sound of belonging that says, "You are not erased. You are received." I walked into the lobby where the corkboard leaned slightly, its pins crooked from years of overuse. The carpet tried to look professional, but everyone knew it was just tired. I drilled the brass slot into the board, leveled it, and tapped the screws home. Above it, I taped a sign Lily had lettered in her careful script. Neighbor letters. Tell the truth. Keep it short. We'll see it. She had insisted on writing it herself because, as she said, my handwriting belonged on checks and lists, not signs that misses. Patel leaned out of 2B as the final screw tightened. "Mr. Jennings," she said, brow furrowed in curiosity. "What is this?" "A mailbox of courage," I said. "I have some," she whispered, glancing upstairs. "My landlord turns off the heat at night. My mother is cold." "Then write it." I told her. She pulled a pen she always kept tucked behind her ear and scribbled. "The heat stops at midnight. My mother is cold." She slid it through the slot. It clanged to the floor. Other doors opened at the sound. A nurse wrote, "Stop slamming the laundry room door." Some of us work nights. A quiet man I'd only seen on Sundays wrote, "Whoever leaves groceries at 3C, thank you. My brother had surgery. We needed apples." Lily stopped by later and added, "Free bike tune-up Saturday. Bring donuts." The slot swallowed the papers and fed the hall. With one screw and permission, we'd built a small machine that turned silence into community. That night, I added a new tab in my binder. Not control, not history, but future. On the first page I wrote, "Mailbox works. Stories find rooms. Leave it." The next evening, Daniel knocked once, different from his old rhythm, softer, asking, not demanding. "I won't stay," he said, holding out an envelope. "Third payment. On time." "I know," I said. Mark had already called with the word current. Daniel glanced at the brass slot, still resting on my table. He smiled. "Remember the Christmas box?" Helen would read our list and say, "We can do the socks. We'll pencil the pony for later." She liked scheduling ponies. I said. He nodded. I didn't open the flash drive. It sat on the counter. I thought about using it to win. Then I realized I didn't need to win. I needed to be done. "Good," I said. Relief, in men our age, arrives as posture. We had tea, standing in the kitchen, 2 mugs between us. He spoke of the house. I went there, didn't go in. Just stood outside long enough to say goodbye to the version of me who thought ownership meant size. I'm smaller now. It fits better. "You'll grow where it matters," I said. Before leaving, he placed a hand on my binder, not to open it, only to feel its weight. 90 days. Lunch. Lunch. My treat, I said. "A tea the door," he paused. "Thank you for not using the audio." "I didn't need to," I said. "You heard it." He nodded, and the apartment exhaled when he left. The mailbox in the lobby filled during the week. On Tuesdays, after class, we read the letters aloud. The nurse's complaint. The thank yous. Mrs. Patel's note. Even an apology from someone who had been hogging 2 washers. Our landlord came to a meeting, awkward but present. "I'll set the heat to 68 every night," he said, like a man discovering he could have spoken the sentence 5 winters ago. He fixed the laundry door. We brought donuts. Lily tuned bikes. Mrs. Patel's mother wore the red scarf someone had left with the word warm. At home, I pinned Ruth and Alan's letter beside Lily's chess sketch and my syllabus. 3 papers. 3 voices. They spoke to each other like neighbors. At month's end, I mailed my second check to Greenbridge. Rose's dog approved of Evelyn's paperwork. My binder was fatter, steadier. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't rehearse conversations before sleep. I didn't replay the fence. I didn't argue with ghosts. I had class, shelter, mailbox, kettle, and tiredness that didn't need drama. If you want fireworks, you'll be disappointed. Here's what I have. The clank of a letter sliding into a box. The click of a binder shutting. The sound of a tree across town still keeping its promise to a boy I raised and the man he is becoming. 90 days passed. Then one more. On the 91st morning, I drank coffee I didn't have to earn. At noon, Daniel walked into the diner. Not too early, not too late. We shared eggs, toast, and silence that didn't require rescue. I was angry at you, he said, for everything, but I couldn't hate you. Your name kept showing up on things that made sense. I think I've been allergic to sense. Side effect of applause. You deserve different, not worse, I told him. Later, he admitted Ruth and Alan had asked him the Maple's name. He'd answered, Coach. That was the right name. That I sat with that truth until my coffee cooled. When Lily later handed me her drawing of a rook and a king fused into a bridge, I knew the lesson had landed. You don't need applause. You need a way across. I don't have a finale for you. Only this. A kettle that shines, a binder that keeps its tabs honest, a mailbox where truth clanks, and a maple that listens to its name again. I carry a card in my coat pocket. W. Jennings. Needs blanket. Coffee. A place to sit where he can see the door. Helen's hand had written on the back, come back when you're ready to be warm. It took 40 years. I came back because warmth is patient, because paper can be prayer, because dignity belongs in the budget, because calendars are kinder than anger, because I said so. Thank you for walking with me through this story. If it touched you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And when you're ready for the next story, click the playlist now showing on your screen.